Welcome. This is the Lean Into Artcast, a podcast where a couple of visual storytellers get together and we wrap our heads around a fun, interesting, creative topic every week. And I am Rob Stenzinger, and with me is my co-host,
Jersey Drost.
Yay.
Hey, you didn't say what you did for a living, Rob.
Oh, you know what? I'm a coder, designer, stuff like that.
And I am a cartoonist and teaching artist. How are you doing, Rob? It's just the two of us this time. It's been a while since we've done an episode where it's just the two of us.
Exactly. I want to sing it, but I'm holding it in.
I should have had that queued up in the soundboard. Also, I mean, this means nothing to people who are listening to this after the fact, but we are recording at a new time, in which we didn't make any kind of notice about in the last episode, but we are going to start doing the show at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central, streamed live on Google Plus and on YouTube. So,
yeah, new time, new possibilities, different schedule flexibility that opens up. So that'll be fun. And I know that, for instance, there's a podcast that I believe, the Webcomics Alliance podcast records during our normal time. And so who knows? We may have an easier time with some of those folks as guests and whatnot. But and also, it now becomes like an evening of interesting creative stuff to listen to. Quite possibly.
Yeah, well, and another one that is of interest to me is there's a Twitter chat that happens every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. It's the KidLit chat, #KidLit. And a bunch of people that I like talking to always participate in that while we're doing Lean Into Art. So, yeah, so now I'll get to participate in that. So, yes, Thursday nights will be jam-packed full of ways to interact and discuss visual storytelling. But anyway, so Rob, what are we doing this week? What are we doing, just you and me?
Well, what we do every week is, well, not every other week. That's when we record this show. In the off weeks, we record our sort of less topic focused off the cuff podcast called Extra Lean. But what we do here is we do a little bit of a warm up before we get into our main topic. We call our warm up the curveball. And it's a bit of an intellectual exercise, a question that doesn't necessarily have to have an answer, or might be something difficult that we'd have to dig through a little bit and work, get our brains stretched, that we can actually get some good answer attempted. And I have a curveball for you this week.
I am excited to take a swing at it. What do you got, Rob?
All right. Were you ever surprised at a non-creative job that you found fun and were skilled at? And why do you think that was? And how was that well suited to you, do you think?
Non-creative job
Mm-hmm.
that I found to be fun.
Mm-hmm. Or just were instantly skilled at, or found the sort of climbing up that learning curve just natural.
Good curveball, because it makes me have to walk down, my past, take a trip through my past and really think about it for a second, because I know I had jobs that were not creative that I enjoyed, but I wasn't necessarily great at them. It wasn't something where I was like, oh, hey, when I was a teenager, I worked at Meijer. And for those who don't know, for those who don't live in the Midwest, Meijer is basically sort of like an upscale Walmart. It's like a big box store, but it's not quite as, there's no people of Meijer, Tumblr. But I remember really liking that job, but I liked the people I worked with, and I liked that I worked in the shoe department. It was like I was just boxing shoes. How hard is that?
Well, were you ever boxing shoes and thinking, I'm the best at what I do?
No. I just remember thinking, this is pretty easy, an easy way to make a living. For me, it was. Okay, let me differentiate real quick. I want to make sure I understand the question. Now, enjoy and good at, do they necessarily have to be the same thing?
No, they don't. And so really, I might have phrased it poorly in my reading of the curveball, but it really isn't. It could be either or.
And or, okay. Because one thing that I did as a job in my past that I was really good at, and I don't mind saying so because I hated doing it, was when I was a blackjack dealer back when I was
was
like
wondering.
20,
Yeah.
21, and I did it literally just to make money and save up some money.
Mhm.
I did not like doing it at all. To this day, if I hear slot machines, it makes me very uncomfortable. Um, totally did a Clockwork Orange on me, but I was really good at it. I mean, like I was one of the faster dealers on my shift. I could deal like I don't remember what like there was like a range of like how many hands per hour they wanted you to be able to deal, and I was on the high end of that. And after a while, and I know I'm pretty sure I've told the story on the Lean Tart Cast before. Uh, I found myself being able to work on autopilot where I could be dealing 5 or 6 hands in a row and not really being paying attention, but my body was just counting the cards for me and I wasn't making any mistakes. But then all of a sudden I would kind of come out of that fugue state and I would be stuck on a hand. It would be like a 5 and a 10. How hard is that to count? But I'd be like, like that's how much on autopilot I was in. Did I enjoy it? No, but I was really good at it. So what was the second part of the question?
Well, okay. Why do you think that was?
Why do
Why
I
do you?
think I was
Yeah.
good at it?
How did that? Yeah. Why do you think it clicked with you? Um,
Hmm. Uh, Why did it click with me?
hmm
Okay. Now, making sure that I underscore again, I did not like doing this.
hmm
But one thing I did really connect with was I, okay, I just watched the movie Footloose again recently.
hmm
Kevin Bacon movie, right? And like one thing that always comes up in conversation amongst me and friends, like especially when we get in the topic of like music and stuff, is like I've never had that experience where music like kind of gets into me and I feel a rhythm and my body just starts doing stuff, you know? Like when people are like, you sometimes you just gotta dance. I'm like, I've never felt that. That's a really alien concept to me and I'd love to understand it. But I've never been at like a dance or anything where it's like, oh, the rhythm's getting me, you know? But when I was doing the dealing,
Yeah.
there, why are you laughing?
Nothing. Just, ooh, the rhythm's getting me. I love that. That's awesome.
Well, I've had people describe it to me like that, where it's like
Yeah.
the music's just like if it's just the right kind or whatever, like
Yeah,
you'll
totally. The rhythm's gonna get you.
yeah, Miami Sound Machine, isn't that what it is? Like I know music and I enjoy music, but I've
hmm
never been like, I have to move now, you know? Like
hmm
anyway, but there was something about like dealing when you're dealing in this half circle, and I found myself enjoying trying to get my body to this very smooth range of motion, so that instead of going, because you're pulling the cards out of like this the thing they call the shoe. It's like this like collection of decks, right? You've seen
hmm
what these things look like, right? And it's like a box with a trapezoid on the end, and you slide the cards out of the end of the trapezoid. And so I'm sliding the cards out, and like you could go sharp movement out, slap the card down. You could do that. So it's like slap, 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 slap. But what I was trying to do was, and this was purely because it was such a repetitive and kind of boring job at times. I tried to get it so that I was moving very smoothly. So like the movement from my hand pulling the card out to laying it down on the table was all like a completely smooth rhythmic motion that I could pull my arm back to the next card without any slapping, without any kind of hard movements. It was a way I entertained myself, and in exploring that, I found that I got really, really fast and almost like hypnotic to the point where, like, if I was really a nasty jerk, I could play tricks on the players, which made some pit bosses happy, right? So, anyway, so it became a way to entertain myself in a job I didn't enjoy doing, which made me good at that job. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. That's kind of, and not that. Let's see. Now this is going to feel all chin strokey and like I'm saying indeed, and like this is where I expected, but I kind of am going to do that where I have this hypothesis about that where I think we end up looking for how we can like if you don't want to just be in misery doing that, right?
Yeah.
You like there are different dimensions you could observe about that given experience. So maybe it's, upper body motion, maybe it's your breathing, maybe it's the environment, like if you're mowing a golf course or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious if like that thing that maybe you didn't like but you were really good at, like what keeps you going back. I would guess is not just some kind of your paycheck or whatnot. I'm guessing there's something else that you're connecting with, and so I was curious to
Yeah,
hear.
yeah. And I mean, I don't want to mischaracterize this and make it to where, like, my soul was crying every time I did it, because
Mm-hmm.
there also was the positive feedback of the bosses were really happy with my performance. Like, there were nights where it's like, oh, we've got some high rollers coming in. We got to bring in our best dealers for this. Jersey, you and you and you go work this table. And there was like, I mean, again, while I didn't necessarily enjoy the concept of gambling, there was that positive feedback loop of like, yeah, uh, I'm being valued here, right?
Mm.
As mixed a message as it is, but mostly what it was like finding out that, oh, my body can do really cool things when I practice something, when I pay attention to something, when I focused. And the faster I dealt meant the faster I got to practice talking fast, which is something I've always, ever since I was a little kid, always been kind of fascinated by, like
Oh.
auctioneers and characters like Blur, like Micro Machine Man, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, yeah, like those things are what sustained me and kept me from, succumbing to, self pity and all that stuff. Although I felt plenty of that because I was in my early 20s.
there's uh there's plenty of there's plenty of what life milestone self pity to be had, but there's also um the interesting things to be found in pretty much any job. That
Yeah,
was that's kind of my guess. I mean, some it depends on who you work with. Depends, since there's so many variables, right?
of
Because
course.
it can be just nothing at all about the physical motions or the environment or your breathing or the aesthetics or whatever. It could just be cool people that are they're part
And
of
that
it too.
that was the situation when I was 19. Like when I was working in that shoe department, I didn't care about shoes, and I didn't
Mm.
care about boxing shoes or like organizing them to any kind of special degree. It's that I worked with really, really great people who I genuinely liked talking with.
Mm.
So, and like if I did a good job, it was like, oh god, this is gonna be so lame, Rob. It was like I wanted to do it for the team kind of thing. It's like I don't want to leave Barbara hanging.
I There's no way that a gentleman who enjoys something like what the Care Bears, right, would not be, you know, somehow pleased by that, right? Because you know what, making Barbara's job go better is great for everybody, right? Feels
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, you totally nailed that. Maybe I didn't make it a hard enough curveball, but I thought it
Well,
was. I don't know. What do you think?
no, no,
Interesting.
that was it was more dangerous than I thought it was going to be.
Hmm.
I'm just glad
Cool.
that I was able to drum up an experience off the top of my head like that. But
Mm-hmm.
I think at this point, 123 episodes in, uh, we're probably intuiting what the other person can do, with what we do.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely will try harder on those curveballs at different times, but sometimes it's just investigation, and we
Yeah.
can get to know a little more about one another and all that kind of stuff. It's fun. So, curveball knocked out of the park.
Does that mean it's time to get the topic?
Yeah, let's move on to our main topic today.
Well, that means we've got to fly 10,000 feet up,
Yeah.
discuss the topic in abstract, look at it from every conceivable angle. And 2 months ago, we did an episode called Reading, Watching, and Playing. And we're
Mm-hmm.
doing it again because I personally think this is something we should institute as a regular recurring feature of the show. Maybe not every 2 months, but every once in a while we should remind ourselves to step back and uh, rather than try to forcefully investigate a topic every time, stop and look at the fuel that generates the topics. Look at the fuel that generates the creativity. Stop and reflect on what we've been doing. I was just at the Michigan State University Comics Forum
Mm.
last weekend in Lansing, Michigan, and a young I don't know, freshman in college who was taking art classes came up to me and was kind of like picking my brain about getting started in the comics field and the illustration field. And they asked me, this was, I thought, the most interesting question. They said, how do you know when you're getting better? I was like, oof, how how do you know when you're getting better? And I found as I fumbled through the question and kind of like so they threw me a curveball and I'm sitting there like chewing on it and wondering about it and kind of talking aloud about it. And finally I was like, a lot of it has to do with reflection. And like, are you taking time in your life to stop and reflect on when you finished a thing and look at what was before and what was after? How are you different after making a thing? What were your assumptions going in? What do you feel? How do you feel differently now? I think this kind of thing of sitting back and looking at what we're reading, watching, and playing and reflecting on it is another kind of reflection to add up to, that whole wayfinding thing in a creative endeavor, right?
Oh, I totally agree. And one thing I like to do is sort of shake up patterns, try new things and whatnot. And I thought doing this topic again relatively soon would be an interesting sample, right? Because when we've been doing the podcast for roughly 4+ years, and then only 2 months later do that same topic again, I think that's kind of an interesting, more realistic sample, because it's kind of like we had all this past stuff we could have brought to the table, right? Now it's like, okay, in the normal course of our creative and productive weeks, day job, night job, commitments all over the place, what does that look like? The reading, watching, playing. And I thought, that might be another fun layer to this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and now you got me thinking. I mean, another thing that people have been watching us on the social medias, one of the things I recently broke out again was the Emergent Task Planner again. And it's been a couple years. The last entry I had in the book was October of 2013. So it's been about a year and a half since I've used it. And I remember reporting in the past that I really don't feel like I need it because I learned a lot from the last time I used it and got a sense of like where my time goes and how much time I need for certain tasks. But I broke it out again because just a general feeling of overwhelmness kind of thing with scheduling. Okay, time to start tracking, find out where my time's going, to find out where my energy's going. I wonder, I should be adding what I'm reading, watching, and playing to these things too. I think that should be getting journaled.
That's a great idea. I've been doing that in a less structured manner in my day one journal from time to time. And I'm really hooked on that app. And if it wasn't for how it prompts me at different times, I feel like I dismiss it without filling in one word of text fairly commonly, right? But yet I look back and it prompts me often enough where it's not annoying, and often enough where I do end up putting enough in it where I do journal almost every day.
Wow.
And even though like I did not feel like that was true, like I had a couple of 3-4 day gaps, which isn't really that common, right? And I expected it to be worse, though. It was interesting looking back and being like, oh, cool. Here's a whole bunch of journaling. But you know what? You mentioned the Emergent Task Planner, and just as an interesting plug for our upcoming episode, Mr. Task Planner, Mr. Emergent, Dave Say is coming on the show next in 2 weeks from today.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So excited to
that's
talk to him again.
Fun to bring that up again, and yeah, exactly. Anyway, so you've been doing some of that rhythmic capturing of what's been transpiring and whatnot.
Yeah, and I just think that it'd be a good idea to start capturing like some of the background radiation as well. Things that I typically think of, and that maybe I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves by going into on the ground stuff, but things that I think of as entertainment or escape or diversion, that should be getting captured as well, because there's a reason I'm going to these things, whether I know it or not, right? And it'd be cool to go back and look at, okay, what are the patterns? What happened during the day, and why did I go to that at night? Or why was this playing during the day while I was doing that? Because I mean, for me, I mean, maybe this is a 10,000 feet up thing. I find that sometimes I'm going to it for information, stimulation. I need to jumpstart my brain. Sometimes I'm going to it for comfort food. I'm going to play this in the background because it centers me, and I need to, just focus on this task, and this will help me focus on this task. Sometimes it's to distract me. Sometimes it's, if I put this on, I know I can't write. Therefore, I'll focus on drawing. I'm drawing my webcomic. I shouldn't be, but I really want to play this right now. And by playing this, I know I won't be able to write. So therefore, I don't have to write now. So I'll cheat myself a little bit every once in a while. You're laughing knowingly.
No, it's I totally use the different media I consume in a variety of ways. Like if I'm getting I'm getting amped up intellectually, I think I'm near info junkie level of consumer. And my wife would totally be like, haha, yes you are. Like you're past being near and you've rocketed far into junkie territory. Because I'll be listening to any number of podcasts throughout a day, depending on the task I'm engaged in, and I'll be looking at like a lot of nonfiction books and whatnot as well, in a variety of formats. Oftentimes Audible, but sometimes both Audible and Kindle, that kind of thing. But then that's like one mode where I'm just super soaking in stuff, and then I go into sort of more of a just I want to be comfortably entertained, where I'm absolutely not consuming that much new info, right? My RSS feed is building up and building up. My Audible credits just keep piling up.
But Dragon Ball needs a watching, and now. Right?
Oh gosh, and it's so wonderful to have it on in the background, right? Where I'm just like somehow the world is brighter, my heart beats better, and I'm just so pleased with this cool, awesome energy I'm floating in because this thing's on the television, right?
Yeah.
I totally use that, and in fact, I have comfort things where I probably know like every word of some things, and like even though it's like for instance, like okay, I'll say one of those is Cowboy Bebop the movie, right? And if like for instance, Kate and I both need to be working on some stuff or whatever, we'll put that on in the background, and it just is like productivity zone. Yet super fun as we're both quoting this movie, and
okay,
don't even need to look up.
So
yeah, go ahead.
You have very lightheartedly kind of ribbed me in the past about, well, I wouldn't say ribbed, but you brought up when we were talking at the Up Fair, and you made the mistake of bringing up the Galaxy Rangers show, and I went, oh, the Galaxy Rangers, and I started going off about all these things that I like about it. One of the things I got on my list today is one of those things. Where somebody made the mistake of asking me about it at the MSU Comics Forum, and I felt really bad for the people who were at tables near me because I saw them looking at me like, does he have an off button? But
no.
What I should have said, what I should have done is turn it around on you and asked you about Cowboy Bebop the movie then.
Dang it.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Fair enough. No, absolutely. It's it's definitely I've thrown many shovelfuls of guff you're in your direction regarding that, but yet it's also like it's an amazing skill that I respect as far as like it takes. I feel like I work really hard to like even remember the people in a band that I love, right? the names of the people, or like all the songs on different albums or whatever, right? Whereas something that like even like Robotech, right? I don't know that much info about it, really, right? Like I think for someone who has seen it as many times as I have and whatnot, I feel like it probably should have more things memorized about it, right? But it's fun. So it's funny. I feel like I'm not really the somehow wired to be that mega awesome trivia, bursting, to the brim kind of person, right? With as many things as I would like to be.
Yeah, I think that skill is kind of overrated, though. That's just information collection. It doesn't give you any useful way to implement the information, right? Necessarily, I should say.
Unless it's the Galaxy Rangers, and then I'm pretty sure you need that.
Unless, yes, if it's 2 minutes to midnight and 0 hour, like staving off 0 hour, can only be achieved through knowledge of the Galaxy Rangers cartoon, I'm your guy. Mm-hmm. But
no guts, no glory, indeed.
Anyway, So yes, comfort food, Cowboy Bebop. Yeah, putting on something where it's like, yes, like where I could probably play like a few notes of the soundtrack from the film, and you would know what the next line is. Sometimes that's a great thing to have, right?
Yeah. Right. Yes. Sorry. The last time it was on, for instance, there's a this is horrible. This is terrible, right? There's a young gentleman who gets stabbed, right? And that's his reward for a certain hard work he did for a bad character in the movie. And like I've got the rhythm of his death gasps
Yeah.
perfectly down where I can crack up my wife. Anyway, there you go.
It's pretend violence.
It is pretend violence. Feels weird to say out loud.
Yeah,
But
I know.
I know.
But it's pretend. So
It is.
okay. Well, do we
Anyway.
want to talk about what we're reading,
Yeah, let's do
watching,
that.
and playing? I think we've reframed it up. You go
Yes.
first.
Okay. Okay, so one of the nonfiction things I'm reading, which is pretty much only one right now, and it's a very short book, relatively speaking, and I'm not going through it very quickly. But it's called 0 to 1, and it's by, let's see, Peter Thiel and Blake Masters. And it's basically about starting businesses, and it's more or less insight for someone who has created some businesses and invested in a bunch and whatnot. And I thought it was basically I was hunting for some interesting insight from that realm where a lot of people thought it was pretty cool and creative and whatnot. And I thought, well, it seems just to kind of get more exposed to that world. And as someone who tries to launch different creative efforts and whatnot, I thought it could be informative. And I think the thing that I'm taking away from it right now, this is not much deeper than its title, but I think it conveys well the circumstance of if you're taking an idea that exists and then iterating on it. Obviously, there's a lot of that can be a lot more efficient, but it's probably not necessarily as valuable. I don't know. So I'm not sure if I'm buying all of the different theses and whatnot compared to like when you bring something into the world that didn't exist. So 0 to 1, nothing to something, is possibly more valuable kind of thing. So
Well, he's telegraphing his bias right with the title, right?
extremely. There's piles of that bias telegraphing throughout.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been amazing, but it's been interesting. So sometimes I like to tune into things that are not as hyper specific to the channel that I'd like to mostly focus on like psychology and design, and the books in that realm I've definitely consumed quite a few in recent years, and it's nice to reach out to something different.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you bring this up. I mean, because it's something that the internet gets. People come along and slag the internet by saying things like, well, it's just an echo chamber. If the algorithms and if your social circles are all just repeating what you like, you're never getting exposed to new things. First of all, you still do. I mean, because my group of friends that I associate with online don't necessarily share all of my tastes, and they sometimes reshare things into my feed that I never would have thought of before, or seen before, or been exposed to otherwise. And secondly, I mean, it's kind of dismissing the fact that people are, generally speaking, pretty curious creatures, and sometimes, we intentionally go out and seek out things that aren't necessarily in the algorithmic mix, right?
Exactly. It's not your algorithm and your biases that are interacting with these algorithms are not impermeable. The stuff is going to leak in. And if you're a little bit curious, you might be curious about, hey, what's that leak?
Well, no, actually, I don't know about you. This is sort of like a meta discussion about the book that you're reading.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes when I encounter opinions that I wildly disagree with, it kind of stimulates me to make sure that I'm understanding them You know, like, you can't possibly be saying that. Nobody would say that. And okay, I'm going to read this again. I'm going to read a little deeper. I'm going to read a little deeper because I want to make sure I understand. Are you really saying that? You know, and then when I do that, like, a little bit of fear will creep in. Like, I don't want them to change my mind. I feel strongly about this. What if they have a really great crowning argument that's going to change my mind? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But there's like a little bit of an intellectual thrill ride in doing that sometimes, if the argument is well made, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, let's see, and so some of it too is I don't always absorb. Depends on the book. Some books I absorb the first time through just fine, and um, I suppose if it's based on, if it builds upon existing things I'm more familiar with, it does feel like, well, okay, I can get through this one pretty fast. But if it's pretty new, I may have like that, oh no he didn't reaction, and but then it just feels like, what do I know? I don't think I know enough yet, right? I need to soak in this for a while. I'm not repulsed, but whatever. Let's see what happens. Um, and it's possible that I may disconnect if it doesn't seem like it's rewarding me for the time I'm investing in it. Like, I don't feel like I'm learning anything, but I do like to try to give it a long enough of a shot. And I think there's a bunch of different ways where people could interpret that, like some way of just being curious about this new stuff. That, yeah, um, I don't think I don't know. I don't think the echo chamber is quite as airtight as.
No, I don't think so either. And I think it's a simplistic way of trying to get people's hackles raised, right?
Exactly. Oh, you clicked on my link.
These
There you go.
kids.
Yep. Link baiters. Oh my gosh! What if graffiti in the future is just link bait?
I think you need to get William Gibson on the horn. Call him up.
Oh no, they're all gonna be kids surfing on the back of cards on hoverboards with freaking Bitly things that with some kind of shocking headline.
Yes, it's saying like, and number 14 blew my mind. You won't believe number 7.
Yeah. Shoot. We will miss the good graffiti of nowadays. All right. So Jersey, what are you currently reading?
Okay, well, see, I haven't, in the last 2 months, I've not had time to do a lot of prose or nonfiction reading, but I have been reading comics. And these were not on my list, Rob, but it occurred to me tonight that I had been. Get these out. Actually, they're in bags right now. Have you heard of Abigail and the Snowman by Roger Langridge?
Oh my gosh, I have to get it. No.
Little girl and her abominable snowman friend?
Yep. I mean, the title, the art looks super cute, and you said Roger Langridge, so.
Yeah, Roger Langridge, enough said, right?
Yeah.
But, yeah, this little girl finds out that, or she comes across this abominable snowman smoking a pipe and wearing a suit. And there's this whole business where he has escaped from a secret government, like Area 52 kind of thing. Or Area 51? Area 51. And so there's these agents who are after him, but the agents are kind of bumbling and foolish, and they can't quite. Here we go. Here's where he's disposing of them, rather comically. And the thing is that he's invisible to everyone but children, and even he doesn't understand why. And so it's all about this girl deciding to keep him as a friend, and at the same time trying to get to the bottom of why these government guys, these government spooks are after him, and also dealing with the fact that her father is having a terrible time trying to keep a job and keep a roof over her head. And so it's a story about family, it's a story about friendship, and it's a story about a abominable snowman in a suit. So
whoa.
And it's got all that wonderful Roger Langridge kind of comedy and wordplay and physical comedy. There's a couple issues out now from Kaboom, so I have been enjoying the heck out of that. I mean, look at that cover. Look at that. How could you not love it?
It's beautiful.
So, yeah. But other than that, I haven't been reading a lot of books. My reading time has been severely limited this last couple months, and I'm that's something I need to course correct on. So mostly what I've been reading is I've just been, doing my RSS feed thing of like collecting links and then at the end of the day kind of breezing through them quickly. And one of the things that I've been reading a lot about is just kind of keeping abreast of what's been happening in the tablet PC market with all these Wacom enabled tablets. And it seems like I want to be clear and set this up by saying I don't know if this is just because I'm paying attention to this arena, but it seems like a lot of stuff is happening in this arena all of a sudden. Like what was it? 2 years ago, we did like an episode of the Lean Tartcast where I was so pumped up about the Galaxy Note tablet, right? The Galaxy Note 10.1. And I'm like, well, finally we got a tablet that has like a pen input and it's got pressure sensitivity. How long have we been waiting for this? And like 2 years later, it's like a whole bunch of different companies are putting out these things, like between the Microsoft Surface and now there's the Toshiba Encore that just came out, was announced at CES. Full Windows 8. Desktop class applications you can run on it with a Wacom digitizer, and it's like $350.
What?
Yeah.
Does it have like 1 mega RAM? What's going on here?
That's where you get hit. Is like the reason it's $350 because it's only got an Atom processor in it, so it doesn't have like super high end processing, and I think it only comes with like a gig or 2 gigs of RAM.
Okay.
So I mean, you're not going to be able to do like crazy 1200 DPI Photoshop paintings in it, but I mean, you could probably run, like, you could do some pretty reasonable Manga Studio illustration because Manga Studio isn't that resource hungry compared to Photoshop. So I'm looking at that going like, man, it's like, that would be an awesome sketch pad. HP just came out with this thing called HP Envy X2, which is like a 15-inch, basically giant Surface Pro, but it uses like a more primitive digitizer. It uses a Synaptic digitizer. It's not Wacom and it's not Entrig. So like the drawing on it isn't that great, but it's like give Synaptic time to like, iterate on their drivers and perhaps it will get better. And then I don't know, Asus is doing a whole bunch, doing some little tablets that have pressure sensitivity. It's just crazy. So it seems like something's happening.
Okay. Now, what about the I don't know. Maybe it's dismissible because of its incredible price tag, but like the whatever, the Wacom
the Cintiq Companion.
Cintiq Companion. There you go.
What about it?
I don't know. Does it seem worthy or interesting, or is it just dismissible?
No, yeah, it totally seems worthy and interesting.
Okay.
Because I mean, it's spec wise, like from what I've been reading about, it's equivalent to the Surface Pro. It's like Ultrabook class, right? So it's got like the new one just rolled out, and I think you can get up to 16 gigs of RAM in that thing. So 16 gigs of RAM, you've got like a pretty decent processor, a 13-inch screen. It's a little big, it's a little unwieldy. It's gonna be the size of like a 15-inch laptop. But I mean, that price is just like, it's a real investment. But the other nice thing that I've been reading about it, and I don't know if this is really like, am I getting too deep into this now, Rob? Am I getting too?
I maybe, but I'm curious. So please continue.
Like the thing they did with the new one that just came out, and this was another one that was in my reading list. So the new one just rolled out, and you can use it as just a general Cintiq as well. Right, so you can plug it into your Mac.
Oh, dude, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it works where you can plug it into your Mac or your PC, and it functions just as a Cintiq,
which future-proofs it.
Yep.
Because very few of these things have the ability for upgrading the internals on them anymore. Like they're soldering all the stuff in nowadays, which is kind of a bummer. Like so, it's like, oh, I want to drop in 2 more RAM chips in it. Can't do it. But so like it becomes like this game of future proofing. So like if I decide to get like the Surface Pro 3 or whatever, it's like I got to get the top of the line one to make sure that it lasts, at least 4 or 5 years. Whereas with the Companion, the big value add I think it has right now is that it can be used as just a regular Cintiq should it become outdated. So yeah, it's just cool that there's so many options now, and that there's like low point of entry options.
Yeah, it's stunning that there is something that is right in the $350 range or so, and of course there's still the sort of the Samsung Galaxy Note angle on things, which I mean it's been a really cool couple of years. I don't blame you for looking at that because it's something that I've been really desiring. And I mean, 2 years ago or so, right? 2012, 2014, whatever, 2.5 years ago almost, I sold my my MacBook or my ModBook,
Hmm.
and so I was living the sort of dream. If your dream is like carry a super heavy and clunky um,
Non-touch enabled.
non-touch enabled, yeah, uh, but it was a Mac OS tablet, and that alone was magical. I
Yeah.
loved it. I loved it very much. It just had enough annoying to it where I basically sold it and then bought the Samsung Galaxy Note 10.1. But anyway, in recent, let's see, where was I going to go with that? But I don't know. I've been missing it, and I had something. Oh yeah, there's that app called Astropad. So Astropad is like $50. It's for your for Mac OS 10, and it lets you use an iPad as a touch sensitive input device for a Mac.
Yep. And doesn't
Where
it
it's
work with pressure sensitive pens? So like if you have one of those
exactly
Bluetooth pressure sensitive pens, you can use your iPad as a Cintiq.
exactly.
Crazy.
It's decent. I'm experimenting with it.
Okay,
Problem is,
cool,
it's
cool.
only a 1024 by 768 window, right? So I'm still learning and exploring. So like, what you end up doing is more or less shrinking down on your desktop the window of the app that you care about, and it's most integrated with Photoshop right now. And it sort of it was working okay with Manga Studio or Clip Studio Paint, and but it's still a few rough edges. I don't know. The jury's out. I did throw $50 at it because I don't want to be limited to 7 days, and I spent like 3 days with it, and I'm like, okay, they deserve $50, and I'm going to go play with this for a while. And so this is in a way my strategy to hold out and wait for whatever magical tablet comes along.
Yeah, it's getting. I mean, that's the funny downside is as more come out, it becomes even more of a waiting game, waiting for like the one that hits all of the buttons, right? Um, so I guess yeah, this isn't divergent from the main topic because this is reading that falls under sort of like less intense research, right? I've got this casual research stream that's coming in that my feeds are. I'm collecting through my various feeds into singular places that I just do like a little bit of reading before bed kind of thing.
Mm.
Um, this isn't the kind of like Rob Stenzinger urgent capture thing where I'm letting it wash over me with my 10,000 bookmarks in Firefox. This is more like, okay, well, add this to read later, add this to read later, add this to read later, and then, I've got 20
Mm.
minutes. I'm going to read those articles that I've been waiting to read. SurfaceProArtist.com is one of the websites where I get a lot of this stuff,
Mm.
which is it's like a blog that's entirely about, pen-enabled tablets and devices like that.
All right, cool. There are certain topics that do, I think, a lot of us who enjoy the working in digital mediums and are visual artists is like this whole whatever this topic is pretty attractive, and it feels like I always wish it were a little more mass media popular, because I think there would be more money thrown at it. But so
Well,
anyway,
that's why I was
makes
saying like
sense.
I feel like there's something's happening in this realm though because of things like Astropad. Like they're proving a use case, they're proving a desire for this. Because I remember seeing articles about Astropad when it came out.
Mhm.
People talking very excitedly about this, and more people are saying like, "Hey, Apple, when are you going to do this?" Not that we need Apple to do it because there's lots of other people doing it now, but I think a lot of people feel like once Apple does it, then it's like, oh, this is a real thing that real people want for some reason, right? Like they get to christen it in a lot of people's minds, not necessarily everybody's, but in some people's minds. But
Yeah.
right, but you're right. It feels like historically this has been and I've complained about this bitterly in other places and on this show. Is like I feel like most commentators are like, why would you even want a pen? When a lot of us are going like, dude, that would be really great. And let me tell you, having touch interface plus pen interface plus pressure sensitivity is as magical as it sounds. It's really, really great, and I'm finding myself actually touching the screen on my iMac now to move things around. Just like how you catch yourself when you're like writing with a pen or like drawing on paper, you'll catch yourself doing Control Z or Command Z or whatever once in a while. Yeah. I'm finding myself habitually like oh, I want to move that, and I'm touching my screen. I'm like, oh, that's right, I don't have touch on this.
Cool. Well, it's all right. I think that's time that was well spent, because a lot of us are excited about that kind of thing.
What else are you reading?
Let's see. What else am I reading? A couple of books. One is, and honestly, both of them are comfort food. But one of them is like surprising me in that it's been, I think, at least 5-6 years since I've read it, and it feels like a little more rough around the edges than what I remembered. And that's On a Pale Horse by what's his name?
Pierce Anthony.
Pierce Anthony. Thank you. Yeah, and I still enjoy the key story beats, so it's kind of fun to remember the character and whatnot. But like a little rough around the edges.
Oh, really?
Rougher around the edges. It's something about a lot of things when I have it really occupies a certain place, like Robotech or whatnot in my catalog of stuff I find inspiring and interesting and whatnot. It's not many things really fall off the shelf, and I'm not saying this is falling off the shelf, but it's going on the back shelf or whatever. So anyway, but then the other one is Ready Player One, which is as awesome as every single time I've gone through it.
You do an audiobook, or are you doing physical book this time?
Audiobook. The audiobook is it's read by Will Wheaton, and he does a fantastic job. So it's yeah, I mean, it's one of those books I've talked about it before. I talked about it on the Polytechnicast and multiple times on this podcast.
Well, but for those who are tuning in for the first time and may have missed out on this book, what's the gist? So
it's a book by Ernest Cline, and it is essentially it's set in the future, and it has elements of many different epics of recent times that you would find enjoyable, and it pays deep homage to the 80s, the entire decade of the 80s, and video games especially. And it's the premise is that you get just by reading the back of the book or the description on Audible is you have someone who is essentially this sort of imagine if like somehow Steve Jobs and Bill Gates kind of amalgamation were like a person who had invented a form of video gaming that more or less took over the world, right? As far as being incredibly useful and entertaining, and then the whole hardware and whatnot was free, right? But this person ran the biggest company in the world, and yet did not have a family, and he died, and he essentially put an Easter egg in his game where if you solve these puzzles or whatnot, you essentially inherit his wealth.
So I also heard it described as like if Willy Wonka was like, testing the children with 80s trivia. Right?
That's a good one too. Yep. It's a bit of that.
Just as dangerous, but you have to know all about, family ties in order to pass one of the tests.
Yeah, and honestly, all of that stuff, it's tough to say. Like I've tried to recommend it to people who are younger than me to see what they think of it, because if you've lived through or appreciate the 80s, where you've lived close enough to it or whatever, and sort of video games from it or music from it or whatever, it's you'll dig it. Anyway, it's
a lot of the from what I understand, a lot of the stuff is like stuff that's embedded in the broader culture. He's not doing that many like super deep cuts where it's like, oh, you had to have been alive in 1985 in order to understand this thing.
No, yeah, the deep cuts I would say would be just the like visceral description of being in a basement of that era, as far as the kind of paneling and the furniture and the precise books and video games that would be adorning that room, the type of television, that kind of thing, right? Or
Right.
particular models of the TRS-80 computer, if you know that kind of thing. If like it has an extra visceral hook if you've been to it, so it amplifies the nostalgic aspect, but it's not like required.
Right. That makes sense. So what are you watching?
Not too much new. Again, I'm in this mode of like being a bit more comforted. I have a giant warm place in my heart for the whole James Burke's Connection series, but like I've been trying to find something new because I've seen it too many times. And I've been really enjoying Cosmos by where the new one, what is it called? Cosmos,
The Space-Time Journey
Space-Time Journey. There you go.
with
Hosted
Neil
by
deGrasse
Neil.
Tyson.
Yep. And I'm almost done with season 1. It's really it's been fun.
A good show.
It's a bit of a mix of storytelling and essays mixed with some science, and but I think it does a good job.
We may have had this discussion before, but have you seen the original Carl Sagan version?
I have only seen clips of the Carl Sagan.
Oh,
version.
wow.
I know.
Carl Sagan one's really good. It's if you like Connections, oh my gosh, you'll flip out over the Carl Sagan version. It's so good. But basically, Neil deGrasse Tyson and his team captured the style that Carl Sagan did, which was basically like, okay, we're going to take a scientific principle, we're going to explore it, but we're going to explore it through the lives of the people who struggled with it. So we're going to talk about, the motions of the planets. Who was it who deduced or discovered what the motions of the planets were? Oh, Johannes Kepler. Well, let's go through his life. And here's a story about Johannes Kepler and like all the things that he struggled with. And here he is playing with the nested solids, and for some reason it wouldn't work. And he must have been so annoyed because he was this close to getting it, but and his teaching gig wasn't working out, and his wife was sick all the time and a very unhappy woman. And there's all these troubles, and then finally he makes that breakthrough. What a great man! And it's like he gets just so pumped about science through the stories of these people who really worked hard and struggled and finally made a breakthrough, right? And that's what Tyson does in his series as well. And he picks some different scientists to talk about. But, it's a cool series for anybody who, like, you don't have to just love science. You just, just storytelling. If you love storytelling, they're really good, too. What?
Absolutely. I'm laughing because it's you can become accustomed to sort of that edutainment style of presentation.
Yeah.
And it's still entertaining. It's still engaging, right? But then I was able to. I hadn't really shared it much with my 5-year-old, and she was watching some of it this evening actually, and I was like, right, just seeing how her reaction. It's like, what? This is really intense, isn't it? Like more so than it was like a whole like recalibration for me, and it's really engaging and has plenty of drama in it.
Yeah.
Given the primary subject matter.
Well, yeah, especially when you start talking about like what happened to some of these visionaries when they were ahead of their time, right? It doesn't always people who are ahead of their time usually don't come out ahead. The world at large doesn't go, "Hey, good for you. You're way ahead of us."
Yeah, or always come out with their head, right?
Yeah, that's what happens a lot, and I shouldn't be laughing, but that is what happens. So a lot of these stories, they don't end well for the people, and that's
And
I can see how
that's intense, especially
Yeah.
if you're 5 years old, and that's a brand new concept. Even we're like, wow.
Also, the style in the Neil deGrasse Tyson one has an animated style with this kind of like graphical, kind of hard edge style, which I can see making some of the intensity of the emotions harder to take. Whereas the Carl Sagan one, they do it with actors, and it was for PBS. And while there were like emotionally intense things, nothing visual, much less so than the Neil deGrasse Tyson version. So, yeah. But I do remember as a child, one of the Cosmos episodes, because I watched it when I was actually your daughter's age. And I remember there's one where they talk about the end of the universe. And I remember that was the first time that concept was ever presented to me. And I remember like kind of like going to my dad being like really shaken up, like, wait, this all ends someday. and my dad's like, well, but it's billions and billions of years from now. That was no comfort. The fact that there was an ending at all was too much for my little brain to take at that time.
Science just laughs. No, that it is exactly. I mean, to be introduced to those kind of concepts, that is concepts alone is very intense. And yeah, the current style is super engaging. And actually, I really do want to. It's like a bit of nerd guilt that I have actually, that I've not gone back and watched it from end to end, and I want to.
Time,
yeah.
dude. When do you have time to do all this stuff? We don't. That's.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
There's no such thing as nerd guilt when you're busy making things.
Well, T-shirt, good one. I think I need that T-shirt actually. So okay, tell me about something you are watching.
Speaking of nerdy, I'm gonna get nerdy, Rob. I'm gonna get nerdy in the bad way. Longtime listeners to the show, or of anything that I've produced in audio, are no doubt aware of my fascination with 80s cartoons, not just purely from a nostalgic place, but also from the way these writers came in and artists and designers came in and solved what seems to be on the surface an extremely difficult problem. We have a toy, like, and I've done talks on this. Like,
Dude,
we have a toy.
The 5 Tips episode of the Lean Into Artcast.
The 5 Tips episode, yes. I'll put that in the show notes. We have a toy, Wheeled Warriors. What is Wheeled Warriors? Okay, well, they're vehicles that you can take apart and reconfigure into different configurations. You can take the wheels off of this one, put it on that one. You can take the weapon off this one, put it on that one. Or you can even combine the vehicles together into a bigger vehicle. Write a show around that. Create a story around that. Chief play feature is that you can take them apart and put them back together, right? And watching how, and not every show was successful in creating something compelling around what was, just a cheap playability factor. But sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised by it, and I love exploring how these different teams solve these problems, because I just think it's an interesting creative challenge. And I myself have explored that in my own work. There's a comic which I will try to find and link to, called Switch Runners, that I did with Mark Rudolph, where that was the premise we approached it with. Let's make up a fictional toy line, come up with a chief playability feature that would be a fun toy, and try to build a story around that, right? I'm writing that down, Switch Runners.
Mm-hmm.
So one I had not checked out since I was a child, I found on YouTube recently, and it's called Sky Commanders. Do you remember this toy line at all, Rob?
I do not. It sounds very familiar. I feel some kind of gut reaction to it, but I could not tell you what it is. I mean, it just sounds. I picture Captain Power, but I'm sure it has nothing to do with that.
Yeah. I mean, it was around the same time too. In the costumes the guys wear are not all that different. The chief playability feature of Sky Commanders was that they were basically like G.I. Joe figures, where they had these big honking backpacks and they had zip lines. That was it. Guy with a futuristic backpack, zip line, connect the zip line to two things, and slide the dude down the rope. And then they had some vehicles that had like tracks that came out of them. So like, here's this big helicopter thing that can land, and then like these roads come out of it so that the guys can run on the roads. And that was it. There was a good team, bad team, Sky Commanders and Raiders. That was those. You got your two teams. They'll have zip lines. Build a story around this, right? And it seems like what would you do with that, right? How would you make that into a compelling storytelling feature so as not to make it just purely commercial? Hey, gentlemen, get your exciting zipline backpacks on. We're going to go out and fight these bad guys, right? So the premise that I think is so great how they solved this problem is that in the South Pacific, a new continent pops out of the ocean, and it's forced out of the ocean by this new element called Theta 7. It's this unstable element that's causing the land to move around. So there's your MacGuffin. We're all chasing after the Theta 7 because it's clearly a very powerful source of energy that does something to the land, and controlling it is probably a good idea. If a new element showed up that made the land change shape, you can bet all the governments of the world would be like, we got to get this thing, right? Okay, so you got your MacGuffin. It's a easy to understand MacGuffin, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of scientific sense. But because it made this new landmass pop out, the landmass is always changing. If you stand in one spot for too long, that ground's not going to be there anymore. The ever changing terrain makes it impossible to use conventional vehicles there. You can't use planes because of all the crosswinds from the changing landscape and plus that energy from that crazy Theta 7. You can't use tanks because the land's always moving around. So you got to use these crazy zip lines to traverse the ever changing high frontier, as they call it. And now you've got your MacGuffins, you got the bad guy who comes in. I got to get this stuff because if I control this crazy element, I can take over the world. And then you got the good guys who were sent in by the U.S. government, of course, because of course it was the 80s. It was Reagan, 1980s. It's always militaristic white guys who come in and have to stop. There's even an episode where a Russian has to join the good guys team, and it's like, oh, Russians, you know. And he's got, and like one of the things I liked that they did was the Russian shows up wearing a Cincinnati Reds hat, which isn't a great joke, but as an adult, going like, you know, did that register with me as a kid? Probably not. But anyway, I thought it was just like a really cool way to solve the problem of the toys. And, you know, they populated it with like loud, vibrant characters with really quick shorthand to understand who they were. So, you know, you got the young guy who has like the futuristic headphones on and sunglasses and he says gnarly all the time. He's the irresponsible one who has things to learn and the team. He's the one who's going to make mistakes. And the commander's always going to be like, I hope you learned your lesson. Yeah, I sure did. Oh, I'm going to make the mistake again next week kind of thing. You know, you got, a lot of the archetypes and stereotypes, like, you know, like the big dumb thug on the bad guys team, but they roped in little neat like details where like the main bad guy is like yelling at his thug underling and he's like, I don't care if you are my brother-in-law, you know. It's like, wow, that's a cool little bit of backstory that, you know, kind of paints a new picture of why this thug is tolerated on this bad guy team. Yeah, it's I'm about like 9 or 10 episodes in. I think there's only 13 in the whole series, and it's a Hanna-Barbera show.
Oh,
Which, if you pay attention to like cartoon history, Hanna-Barbera is mostly known for like Yogi Bear, the Flintstones, Laugh Olympics, a lot of that kind of stuff, like the Simple Walk Cycle, Huckleberry Hound, right, where just his legs move.
But there is also Johnny Quest.
Johnny
Right.
Quest is like one of the few standouts. That and like Space Ghost a little bit,
Yeah.
Birdman a little bit.
Inhumanoids.
Human or what was
Inhumanoids?
Inhumanoids was a Sunbow show. I think you're thinking of Herculoids.
Herculoids.
Yeah,
My
so
oids messed up. Yes.
well, very similar, but yeah, there's a couple of standouts, but like they're not known for doing like action
Absolutely not.
cartoons.
I'm not trying to be contrarian or whatever.
No,
I
no,
just
no.
like,
You're just
they do have this certain little niche within their canon or their.
and I will say, Johnny Quest. Nobody's gonna argue with you. It was an amazing, beautifully animated show. But like that's like one of the rare exceptions. Like nobody thinks of Hanna-Barbera as being like this bastion of action adventure cartoons. But Sky Commanders, for some reason, like they really kind of went all out. It's not Pinocchio, but like there's like fights where like the good guy and like that leader of the good guys and leader of the bad guys are fighting on zip lines, and they found interesting ways for them to fight. So they're not just charging at each other with guns, but like they're flipping between lines and like they're jumping off of one line to get on another line,
wow.
turning upside down and doing another thing. So it's I was really pleasantly surprised with like how good that show was for something that was ostensibly, you know, a commercial for a toy with a pretty dumb playability feature. You know, zip lines are cool, but like, what do you do with it beyond that? Whoop, right?
It's a tough one to have a lot of variability, right?
There,
I mean,
that's a
so you're
nicer
gonna
way of
hook it
saying what I
from-
was trying to say.
to hook it from the couch to your whatever, to your AT-AT, or you're going to hook it from your bookcase to your lazy boy and your whatever. And it's just eventually it'll be like, okay, I think this thing's just going to sit here while I look at it, my latest Transformer or whatever is more interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I
Not a lot
went
of
through my fascination with it when I was a kid, and I made custom backpacks for my G.I. Joes and was doing the zipline thing. It was a fun afternoon, but it didn't stick with me. Like I didn't go into high school still thinking about Sky Commanders the way I did about Transformers and other things. So, but anyway, yeah. So like that's been something I've been playing in the background while doing other tasks, but like sort of keeping one eye on it. Like it's like a folding laundry watching thing where it's not sit back and watch, but it's like, oh, I'm going to be coloring a comic page. I can play that and sort of keep one eye on it. So not exactly comfort food. It's both comfort and study at the same time, if that makes any sense.
I consider that ambient information.
Thank you. It's a great term.
So this, you could consider this just one more thing that I want to share that I've been watching, and it's now relegated to that sort of really positive energy background kind of thing. But I will just sit down and watch it as well. I love it. It's the recent Dragon Ball Z movie, Battle of Gods, and partially why I like to go to this as well as I dream of the day where maybe there's a Saturday Supercast, who knows, or some, where maybe something like that is a topic, and I even have like a giant mind map.
Oh, no way.
I do.
So do I need to watch this then so we can do a Saturday Supercast about it?
Do you need to ask that? Yes, please. Yeah, it's pretty great as far as it's. I would say whether or not you've seen the series, there's enough exposure to it, especially with the DVD. There's a bit of a synopsis of, hey, there's a lot of these fun characters where the planets where they're from, and of course the Earth where they all end up, gets in trouble a lot, and they help defend it. And there's this main character Goku, all that stuff. Here's a
so if
little
I know
sample.
Goku, Gohan, Piccolo, Krillin,
Good enough.
Vegeta, and Frieza, and Planet Namek, I got enough to get into this.
You way have enough, because then you'll see there's character. The story is very character driven and done well in that way, where it's clear enough that the certain situations where like that like Vegeta gets put into, that I'm not going to spoil anything, but like you'll see like, oh wow, that is a hard thing for him, right? And you kind of get that just with this self-contained story. But you would even get it more if you've sort of seen his whole story and whatnot. And it's full of that, and it's rather well done. There you go. So good.
All right.
I don't want to ruin it for anybody.
The gauntlet has been cast. I need to watch Battle of Gods so we can do a Saturday Supercast about it.
Yes. I thought that you know what? Or don't. That's cool if it's like super party foul out of bounds to do that. But
No.
if I'm like, by the way, invite me to your other show. But
if I didn't know you, I'd be
opportunity,
like,
love it.
I'll get right on that. But
Good. Anyway, I'm just saying, like, if it's in the flavor of things that you like to.
Well,
I
I used to watch
as
Dragon Ball.
G,
Oh yeah, I know. I read the comics and I watched the show when it was playing on Cartoon Network. I didn't watch. I got up to the point when Frieza first arrived, so not that far, but far enough where I saw that okay, Vegeta isn't the main villain after all, right? And there's like they're up in the ante with this. And I read the comics, so I know that it's a manga, it's an anime, so there's things that are going to happen in there that wouldn't happen in an American kids show.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm that savvy.
Yep.
But I mean, you're
so
also
I could
talking to a
see that.
guy whose early work, if you go back to like 1998, you can see I was ripping off Toriyama pretty darn hard.
Oh man, it's and obviously the art style is really beautiful. It's interesting to see the progression of the characters visually, and sort of the different treatment of the world and the high budget setting, high budget. It's anyway, a lot of little things, and I could go on and on, and I hope to go on and on someday about it. Anyway,
right.
it's I'm satisfied to just share that.
I'll have to see where I can track it down. It's not on Netflix, I take it.
No.
Right.
Might be like Funimation streaming. I wouldn't be surprised if it's there.
Okay. Well, even if I can just like purchase it cheaply through like Google Play or iTunes or something like that, that'd be cool too.
Wait a minute. I forgot. There's a copy that's on the way. I forgot to tell you that.
What?
Yep.
No, you're just doing that now. All right, I got one more watching thing that I want to add very quickly because this came up in conversation today, and I realized that not enough people know about this, and I just tweeted about it today. It's coming out in DVD. Are you familiar with a series, Rob, called Space Brothers?
No.
So
No.
So this is the manga, and I can't read it because it's in Japanese. But Ann and I got it when we were in New York. So actually, it was Ann who got me turned onto the show. It's hard science fiction anime, and there is I think like 30 or 40 episodes on Crunchyroll that you can watch. And the basic premise is so like it's. I'm kind of a NASA nerd. Um, and one of the things I love about it is that it's a hard science fiction anime that really celebrates what I think makes NASA great, or the space program great. And it's not the glory of the touchdown, it's all of the people working really hard to solve interesting problems to get to that touchdown, right?
Mm.
Yes, somebody stepping on the moon is really, really cool, and it's a momentous occasion. But all of the little things they had to figure out, like figuring out rendezvous, right? Like somebody once described rendezvous in outer space as like try to hit a bullet with another bullet. Right? I shoot this gun, you shoot that gun, and our bullets have to connect. That's what orbital rendezvous is like, right? Figuring out the math for that. Things like that are like what really, like once you start digging deep into like NASA history and stuff, it's like, whoa, it's the things these people had to do with slide rules and sextets. It's amazing. Um, this series takes place like 20 years in the future. And it's about two little boys who see a UFO in their backyard one day. And the UFO flies off to the moon. They're not sure what they saw. Was it real? Was it imagined? It doesn't really get explored. But what they do is the two boys look at each other and say, someday we're going to go to the moon and we're going to find out what that thing was. One of the brothers does grow up and become an astronaut. The other brother falls off the path and just becomes a businessman. And then, like, in his mid-20s decides, wait a second, I went off the wrong path. He quits his job and then joins the Japanese Space Agency. And it's all about him trying to catch up to his brother, not in a competitive way, but more of this way of like, here's the touchdown character. This is the guy who succeeded. And he gets to go to the moon and he gets all those victories and he becomes a celebrity and everything. And this is the guy we follow on all those little tiny threshold victories to catch up, right? And it's got wonderful character drama and everything, but it's also like there's entire episodes where it's like just like solving engineering problems. You know, it's so good.
It sounds awesome.
It's really good.
Yep.
So it's on Crunchyroll, Space Brothers, and it's coming out on DVD in the United States end of this month, end of February, 2015.
Yay! All right, I cannot wait to check that out. Huh. Yeah, I had no idea about that, and that's it's funny because I do find it helps to gather this kind of stuff where it's like, oh, okay, there's something like I know I need to, I know what flavor of some kind of entertainment that I want, and like maybe I want it to be a little bit, like that kind of hard sci-fi where it's not like, it's maybe on like the additional viewings it could become something comfort foodish. I'm guessing there's a lot of tense rides to go on there, right? And anyway, so just sounds perfect for that little flavor, I guess. Okay, so
Time to play.
yeah, okay, time to play. I have mainly been playing downloadable content for Borderlands 2 when I make time for it. Because Borderlands 2 is a great way to blow off steam. And
Remind me what Borderlands is, because
Borderlands is essentially, think of like if Mad Max were kind of an anime style cartoon, very gritty and more funny, but still super violent.
Okay. I'm looking at it now. It looks pretty violent.
It's super violent, and it's so Borderlands. It's this world of let's see, what is the background is. You think clearly there's been a lot of settling and expansion of humanity throughout the universe, and this is some planet called Pandora where there's been this some interesting resources or some settlements, and things went crappy, but then they found this interesting resource called it's escaping me, the iridium, and this iridium ore now is coveted by corporations that take over, and it's kind of this but it's not really well run, so you got these quirky characters taking power and doing lots of questionable things, and and it's totally a post-apocalyptic feeling setting, but mixed with sci-fi. And then the downloadable content totally throws in other stories and genres in there, and it's pretty fun. Where there's good voice acting, interesting, silly narratives. Where one of the DLCs I'm playing is literally like a role playing adventure where characters from the main story are sitting around a table role playing this scenario that now you're in and trying to survive, where now it throws in all these fantasy characters on top of all the sci-fi.
Wow.
And so now you're fighting like skeletons with with essentially these elemental empowered sniper rifles that could cause them to either, if you have one that's powered with caustic effects, it's going to like kind of boil and melt them with acid, and or it could have anyway. It's got all these interesting angles, plus like the gameplay is a lot like a mix of Halo plus Diablo, right? So Diablo, you have this interesting probability of drops and loot that your vanquished foes drop stuff, right? And sometimes it's awesome, the things they drop, and if it could be pretty rare, and that's rewarding in and of itself, because those weapons are handy oftentimes. Anyways, so it's full of a few different kind of reward feedback loop things. Plus, it has this fun theme to it, and it's just just a really good, a blast to play. But it's I just want to. I'll read the title of two of the DLCs that I've been playing through, but haven't finished because I've just been nibbling very slowly at them. Is Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep. that's the that crazy role playing one, and another one is pirate themed, which is also a different kind of fun. So all of a sudden you're in this circumstance of oh gosh, it's like Pirates meets Return of the Jedi, Jabba the Hutt barges stuff, because you're not actually in water. You're on you're in a situation where there's an extreme lack of water, but the ships fly and whatnot and kind of float around in kind of like a gas guzzler way, like just kind of go burp, 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 chugging around the desert. And that one's called Captain Scarlet and Her Pirate's Booty. Anyway, it's fun.
That sounds awesome.
What have you been playing, Jersey?
Well, like you, I haven't had a ton of time for gameplay, so I've been doing nibbling. And got a 3DS this past year. And unfortunately, there are no new Metroid games. Well, fortunately and unfortunately, that there are no new Metroid games to play on this system, because I know if it was a good one, I would get lost in it and I would ignore a lot of things screaming for my attention, because Metroid is the one game that for some reason I can just lose myself in. Luckily for my deadlines, the latest couple of Metroid games have just been too difficult for me to play, and I got frustrated and I just stopped. So what do I play? Well, we got Mario Kart 7, because it's easy to dip in and dip out. I go when I have a race and then I go away. Don't have to worry about if the only leveling up or like progressive gameplay in there is unlocking things, which is a nice surprise, and it gets me hooked to play one more race. It's like, oh, you just unlocked another hang glider. Okay, well, I got to play that once. But it's not enough to keep me, stuck on the thing. So it's like just a cool way to take a break.
I love games that do that well.
Yeah.
That's that's the best when they have that kind of it's like a rewarding bite-sized experience versus like a rewarding gorging experience.
Yeah. And that's what I love about the Metroid games, is the discovering the hidden things. Oh, you went into this room, you beat this guy, you get this new weapon or this new armor or this new power-up that allows you to do things you couldn't do before. Cool. Now I can go back to that room where I was having all that trouble, and I betcha I can get through that room now, right? So I can go back, do that quick little thing, get to a save point. Satisfaction. And go back to my life. Kind of like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And plus, I mean, it's just a simple racer game. But I mean, here's the only like, I guess, unique part of the experience for me is that I haven't played any Mario Kart games since the first Mario Kart for the Super NES back in 1993, 2, something like that. So like,
Crazy.
yeah, like so like, it's like, oh, there's a lot more you can do in this game now, and there's a lot more interesting tracks, and there's a lot of new physics to the game that you never had to deal with in the Super Nintendo version. Like Rainbow Road now waves
Oh,
like yeah, like those thwomps come down and they hit the Rainbow Road, and the whole thing like like rolls like rolling water while you're driving on it. Things like that were like a complete surprise to me. So, but yeah, it's fun. I've never been much of a Game Boy person,
hmm.
but
Which
it's
size of 3DS do you have? Because there's so many. There's a bunch of different form factors to the
are there?
thing. Yeah, is it like an XL or
It's about the
a?
size. It's about the size of like it's red and
Yeah,
it's like about the size of a Galaxy Note phone. It's like a phablet, like 5 inches
yeah.
diagonally.
I wonder if it. Yeah,
It might be an XL.
yeah. I'm guessing it's an XL because like the original one cramped my hand a bit,
Yeah.
and yeah,
I did
and
notice that too, like keeping my thumb on the whatever button you have to hit to keep the gas on, because
mm,
like even though it's like a fairly large portable device, I mean like my hand is like crunched like this for the entire
mm-hmm.
race,
Yep.
and if the race goes on long enough, if it's one of the bigger tracks, like I will notice, or if I play like a couple races in a row, I'll notice that like this muscle gets a little bit cramped up,
Mm-hmm.
but no, it's just it's neat to be able to play. It's I get what makes those game like that console so compelling because it is so easy just to bip in and bip out, and I don't have to break out a big thing and set it all up. I don't have to break out a whole bunch of controllers. Just open the thing, play a thing, shut it, put it away, done. You know?
Well, and there's not a lot of pretense and cutscenes and ramp up and
Yeah.
um, character configuration to the depth of something where you're figuring out like what kind of snarl are you going to have and what kind of you know whatever you want a tattoo on both cheeks or your forehead or what. I mean, like you just go on and on and on into some of those details where it's yeah, super the well Nintendo games just often have, like, even if there's that customization, it's just super playful and deep enough where there's a lot of fun twists and possibilities without being like this abyss of puzzling
Right.
and
Like you've
clicking.
got, and like I need to explain Mario Kart to anybody, but like you got like your choice of character, the frame of the vehicle, the type of tires, and the type of hang glider, right? That's it.
And that's
And that's
just
still a
enough.
lot of variables,
Yep.
but that's it's a really easy to grok and really easy to get in and out of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the interactions are just deep enough that when I'm feeling frustrated because I'm falling behind in the game and somebody hit me with that darn blue turtle shell again, and then the princess drives by really fast and goes ha ha, I'm like, oh, I hate you, princess. I'm getting you next, like that's all the emotional investment I need for like a quick break game.
Yep. It's perfect. Really good balance. I definitely need to put those on my radar. And I haven't played it in months and months, but very similar feeling for the Wii U version of Mario Kart 8. Wonderful masterpiece.
I need to get a Wii U eventually. That's one of those things too where it's like it's not just the financial commitment to it. It's more like what is this thing going to do to me if I have this if I have the One Ring sitting in my living room? Can I resist it? Will I become irresponsible to my other endeavors with such a cool thing sitting there, and especially with all the things I heard about Mario Kart 8. But quick question. This is going to make me into total like old man Luddite, and I drank a glass of Metamucil before we did this recording. I saw that there's like a thing on there we can play online, and Ann and I played against strangers online. But can you also play against people with the Game Boy version?
Yeah, I'm. Let's see. I've played the Game Boy DS, the DSi version, right?
Okay.
And you could do that. And back in those days, you had to exchange a friend code.
Okay. That's
And Yeah.
Okay. That's like those little phone number things I see people sharing on Twitter and stuff. Like here's
Yes.
my okay.
Exactly. So it's kind of like where something like Xbox Live or um, Sony's online system, you can essentially, you know, it's like being part of I don't know, so an old board system or AOL where if you know someone's screen name or handle, you're able to connect, where it's impossible to do that. At least it was back in the day. I have not studied the current situation. I'm basically out of the current generation loop overall with Nintendo because I haven't tried to do multiplayer with the 3DS. In fact, I did gift it to my 5-year-old. And so yeah, I haven't done their current multiplayer. I've heard is a little easier to somehow matchmake than it used to be. So
All
I
right.
don't know.
Kaya and I will share friend codes so I can race against her.
Okay, cool. Um, let's see. I am super curious. Like, so we did reading, watching, playing. We covered the core list, and I mean, isn't it implied in some of like the subtext of what we're talking about that there's a few things that we're hoping to get out to play soon or
Okay.
to read soon?
Sure,
Okay.
you want to go there? We can go there.
Yeah, I'm curious, and or we could switch to on the ground because we've definitely been, and or that could be on the ground because that's the nature of this topic. I mean, there's not a dense amount of tips that we could.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's go on the
answer.
ground and we'll cover the things that we want to read, watch, and play next. And I think the way to color it, or the way to frame it, is based on what we've been doing. What do we want to do next? What do we want to do more of? What do we want to do less of? Right?
Ooh, yeah.
All right. So with that, I should hit the music, and it will be brief, but it's to signify the changing of our mindsets. No longer thinking in abstract. Well, we're always thinking in abstract, but now we're going to try to put a little bit of a practical spin onto it. Some way to put this stuff into what? What are you laughing
It's
about?
a good disclaimer. Yeah, not so much in the abstract, except we're always abstract. So. Take that clarity. You sounded like me with that one. Anyway,
Hey, I'm accepting it. I'm owning it. That's who we are.
darn right.
What do you want to do next? What do you want to read, watch, or play next, Rob? What's on your docket?
Let's see. I'm starting to get the itch to get into more interesting nonfiction, and there's a it's I don't know, like I guess 0 to 1 isn't quite doing it for me. If my description didn't make that clear. And I'm really curious about The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin, and he was essentially like a childhood chess champion that then went on to become a evidently you can somehow have there's tournaments in Tai Chi, which I didn't know about. I mean, I guess it's called push hands. And right, exactly, because I thought Tai Chi is essentially like a meditative set of progression of it's like a holistic mind body meditative motion thing or whatever, but it's also technically a martial art. Anyway, he's champion in that as well, or was. And he has this book called Art of Learning because essentially his thesis is that that's what he had mastered, not particularly chess or particularly Tai Chi, but learning. So I'm curious. It's a little bit of a it's dangerous territory, right? But I'm trying to wander and explore and absorb. I might step into an Anthony Robbins situation. I don't know.
Or you might step into a Stephen Pressfield situation, right? Where it's like just enough to like sort of like it's a touchstone to go back to every once in a while, but not by no means a religion to follow.
Yeah, exactly. So hoping for some interesting input on that one.
What's Enchanted Objects? I see that on your list.
Yeah, so that's a book by David Rose, and it's the idea that the things in our environment can and will be becoming more and more interactive, and there's no reason that they couldn't behave in like a really thoughtful and playful way. So it's to me, it's like user experience for the physical world, where more and more things are becoming interactive. So we'll see if that plays out, but that's the impression I have so far.
Like as like a very basic example, I just saw an article about gosh, why did this come across my feed? Uh, a healthcare robot in Japan that's designed to look like a polar bear.
You just ask why. So yeah, exactly. And it's so funny. They have a lot of interesting robots in Japan that deal with um, uh, humanely helping people.
Yeah. Well, and the crux of the article was basically like they're ramping up production or rather ramping up investigation into these solutions because they have an aging population and a much smaller younger population, right? So like a big part of their population is going to start needing more and more healthcare, and there's fewer and fewer people to actually do it. So robots are going to have to fill in the gap, and they're trying to solve this problem of like, how do you make it so that it's humane and pleasant to interact? So it's not like a Ford factory assembly line robot helping you to the toilet, but something that you actually, I mean, and that's also one of the things on your list is like one of the things they address in Big Hero 6, a movie that recently came out that I talked about with Dave Roman on the Saturday Supercast, is like it's a healthcare robot and it's specifically designed to be something that you want to engage with. And it's like, he even says, there's a line where he says like, my cute huggable design.
Yeah, and it's, I don't know. This is all off the cuff and whatnot, but I mean, we can design things in this world that help us in ways that are thoughtful, or we can build Windows XP over and over again, right? We can that somehow have the rough edges that we can have farm accidents with, or we can, and it's not only this dichotomy, but like you literally need to think of the human factors as something very important, and that people's psychological well-being and their ability to learn and connect, and your ability to empathize with them and theirs with you through the things that you make frickin' matters a lot, whether it's in software or hardware or whatever. And so I don't know. I think there's probably a lot I need to keep studying to level up.
Speaking of watching things, have you been watching, or have you? I'm sure you've at least heard of that television series from the UK called Black Mirror.
You're not the first to mention this one. It's interesting. I need to check this out. Okay.
Yeah, there's an episode. There's an episode that is like very much like, the whole series is pretty good. There's a couple of episodes where I'm like, I wish I didn't see that, but it's basically like a more darker, bleaker, cynical Twilight Zone. But there's one that deals with a potential solution for death, right? And it's built upon things that are already have been in the news. Like, for instance, I remember reading a story, and I don't know how true this was now that I think about it, but supposedly there was a story of like a woman whose husband died, and she made an avatar for him in Second Life or in The Sims or something like that, and interacted with it after his death to sort of like cope with the loss, kind of thing. Okay, take that to the next level based on what you just said about enchanted objects. What does that mean? And it's a pretty interesting little psychological exploration of that.
Wow. That is super intriguing. And I don't know, like all the other stuff I dumped on enchanted objects, to me that's like the topic in general. I just think it's very important. And that in part I'm drawing upon emotional reaction from a variety of stories, but there's one that was covered both at the UI 19 conference I was at a year or two ago, and the book Creative Confidence, both drawing upon the same story of this medical device engineer that worked on what is that, the the one where it takes a magnetic image of your, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the name of the machine even. Anyway,
Oh,
it's
an MRI?
MRI. Thank you. And anyway, he built an incredible, very capable MRI machine, and he noticed that as it was being used, it was actually a very difficult and traumatic time for families. And he essentially then went to the design school at Stanford, or IDEO, I forget which, but that's how he kind of crossed paths with these the folks behind the book, Creative Confidence, and essentially turned the whole experience into something much more humane. And it went from where most children going through it would be crying and had to be drugged to sit still in order for the machine to work, to where they voluntarily sat still because they were into the fantasy of this thing is now this it's a it's sort of a high seas adventure thing, and everyone there is in costume, and the whole machine is painted up like a big pirate ship, and anyway, it's a whole different thing. And experience matters. There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Back to on the ground kind of stuff. Why do you find, or do you suspect that you want to get into more nonfiction stuff? What's changing that's making you say, like, okay, I'm ready for more, less ambient information, more intentional information?
Because I feel in the coming weeks that it's like a capacity thing where I felt full, and now I don't feel as full, and I would like some more. That's the
your brain
simple
stomach's grumbling.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, that's good enough for me. What about the art of asking?
Oh, right. Well, that's something I know I could get better at, and let's see, what is that tool? I use the tool ThinkUp, right? For
Oh, do you?
examines my
Okay,
feeds.
I was
Yeah.
wondering how are you feeling about that?
I like it, and
That's a
find
subscription service. It's a
it
pay
is
service that gives you really detailed analytics about your behavior online, right?
exactly, and it just has some interesting things that it surfaces from that you've looked into in the past, or that your current behavior. It keeps mentioning to me in recent times, I don't ask many questions, and and so I'm like, I think it's important. So why am I not doing that? Why am I not opening up to this? And then plus in different things in various places in my feed, I keep coming across how Amanda Palmer's book, The Art of Asking, is just really clicking with a lot of interesting people. So I think, so then it pops on my radar, and a couple different things reinforcing this. I'm like, yeah, okay. So I've bought it. It's in my Audible downloaded Audible app, ready to play, and I just haven't gotten to it yet. So
Oh wow, that almost feels like a whole episode to unbox.
Hmm.
Because I know that in recent years, in dealing with teams on a variety of projects, a skill was sort of somebody highlighted a skill for me that helped a lot with team management and team building, is when speaking to your team, avoid interrogatives and use more declaratives. Rather than say, why can't we do this? Say, I think it's important that we think about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Less confrontational, it's less provocative, and it encourages people to feel less threatened by your presence, I guess. If you want to have more of a smooth team experience. And I found that when I employed that with teams that I work with, it does work better. You have less confrontation and more collaboration. But that points to the fact that interrogatives are provocative, right? If you go online and say, I think it's important that we think about this, we're going to say, yeah, it is. Thanks for making me think about it.
And Right. So if you're being declarative all the time, you're putting out, just I don't know, things that happen. Well, okay. So one way to look at that is I think you're right. It does the interrogative is in a way confrontational, but it's also interactive.
Yeah.
And so for me in team settings, again, it's this classic thing where if I'm being of service, I will be so super intentional and tuned in thinking about this thing or whatever. Where if I'm just doing stuff based on my own expression or interests or what have you, I don't really necessarily bring to bear all those tools very frequently at all. And where so for when I'm doing facilitation in a group setting, I think about uh, I think about, well, in a lot of ways like a game, and how presenting interesting choices is a key feature of games. And then you have a feedback loop where hopefully it's a progression of stages that has interesting choice sprinkled throughout, but it's this ebb and flow of narrative choices. And I basically, when I'm, like Think Up is pointing out to me, I don't do that as much when I'm in my social streams. And I think, well, it's something I should think about.
Yep.
Yep.
That's good. Okay. So, yeah. And I mean, The Art of Asking is a pretty famous book now. I mean, Amanda Palmer did a TED Talk about the topic. And, full disclosure, she really, really exposes herself to her audience. She talk about vulnerability. I mean, wasn't one of her Kickstarter rewards, or she does this as a performance piece where she'll strip herself completely nude and just let people be close to her or something like that. And it's not
Huh.
at all lewd or anything. It's this art kind of experience, and it's also an expression of like intimacy between creator and fans and so on.
Okay.
You don't know what I'm talking about?
No, I knew that she does performances like that or whatnot. I did not know about that, and yeah. So clearly that's a deep intimacy statement.
Right. Right. Yeah. And in her TED Talk, she talks about how when she was a street performer and she was one of those people who would hold still like a statue kind of thing. And when somebody would throw money into the hat or whatever she had in front of them, she would stop, lean toward them, and look them in the eye to thank them for what they did. And it was this. She kind of highlights this as this connective moment. This is a moment where performer and patron have a true, real one-on-one connection, and that's part of her thesis for The Art of Asking. I'm mischaracterizing it because I haven't read the book. I'm only working off of her TED Talk and a few articles I've read about her. But that gives you an inroad to start, if that interests you, then that book would probably be a good next stop.
And in general, I think I'm into the idea of exploring things where I feel vulnerable. So there you go. Good thing to pick up for that reason as well.
Yeah, I just came across another thing where somebody was talking about. I mean, it's old advice, but somebody it kind of was reiterated through one of my feeds where when you are emotionally uncomfortable in your writing, that's when you're writing something interesting, right? When you're writing about something that's a little bit raw or a little bit or something you got to hang up about, which led me on this kind of spiral chase of going what do I got hang ups about? What am I hung up about?
I'm going hang up shopping. That sounds like a great idea.
And I feel I need to have interviews with my friends to go okay, what do you detect as a hang up that I have? Because that's someplace where I need to go in my work. But anyway,
Good
okay,
stuff.
so all these will be linked in the show notes.
Yeah. Okay, Jersey. What have you been wanting to read, play, or watch?
So, okay, I mentioned comics earlier. Roger Langridge's excellent comic, Abigail and the Snowman, which people should go out and read. Jason Shiga, who has been mentioned on the show before, and I think he was even mentioned on the last Read, Watch, Play episode. He has a Patreon campaign for his excellent webcomic Demon, and that's at patreon.com/Shiga, SHIGA. And chapter 11 just dropped, and because I support him on Patreon. And I got the email, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I am way behind on this book. I mean, I've got all these PDFs just sitting there in my drive waiting to be read, and I need to sit down and take the time to read them. A lot of pages there. So, but what I have read is really good, and I can't wait to read the rest of it. It's just a matter of making the time. Demon, like, to give you like the elevator pitch, or rather the movie trailer pitch. It's a guy who wakes up in an apartment, or rather a hotel room, and promptly tries to kill himself. And upon killing himself, successfully killing himself, wakes up the next day. The evidence of his suicide is still there, but he is still alive. So he tries again, tries to shoot himself, shoots himself, wakes up the next day. There's a bloodstain on the wall where he did it, but he's still alive. Why is he still alive? And thus begins the mystery of the story. So that's at patreon.com/Shiga. So that's one.
Intriguing and intense. Intriguing and intense.
It is intense. And
yeah.
Jason Shiga has warned. He was on the Comics Are Great show a while back, and he warned. He said, like, this is clearly like one of the most, like, strangest, most disturbing things that he's ever done. He warned. He openly warns people that this is a very messed up book, but in a good way. But it's certainly not something to read with a 5-year-old.
Right.
The other one I want to get back to is this one came across my feed again, where somebody was talking about C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy. And this is a book that trilogy I read in my early 20s, probably like 4 or 5 times. I mean, I read it once all the way through, and then I was like, oh my God, that was so good. I got to go live through it again. Did it again. Took a year off, read it again. I read it a lot in my early 20s, and I have not read it probably in over a decade. And I feel like that's a comfort food book I need to go back to, because I really, really enjoyed them. Lewis, he famously wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, and then wound up later on became more famous for writing a bunch of essays about Christianity. And I will not deny that the second and third books of the Space Trilogy, he does not hide the Christian propaganda that he explores, but he also thoughtfully explores it. So while I don't necessarily subscribe to all of his beliefs, I think his exploration of those beliefs is very, very interesting. And he winds up writing really interesting scenarios and characters who are grappling with these kinds of things. Like, one of the things I love about Lewis is, like, in the Chronicles of Narnia, he writes these wonderful little lines that sum up characters where you're familiar with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, at least, right?
Yeah, familiar, but I never actually read the whole series.
Okay, it's about kids going to a closet and they end up in a fairyland where there's a lion who's basically Jesus, right?
Right.
Okay. So, like, at one point, the lion, Aslan, is explaining to these young kids, like, okay, a big battle's coming, all this dangerous stuff's going to happen, here are the stakes. If we fail, bad things could happen. If we win, good things will happen, and so on. And Peter and Edmund are the two brothers. And when Peter heard the words, he thought of the word adventure. When Edmund heard the words, he thought of the word danger. And that sums up the two characters in a nutshell, right? And Lewis writes, like, really nice, succinct little things like that. But the Space Trilogy is about a language specialist who gets abducted by two crooked scientists who have invented a spaceship to go to Mars. And they go to Mars, and the language specialist doesn't know this. All he knows is he's on an alien planet. He's not even sure where he is, and it takes a while for him to figure out he's on Mars. And he's not sure why he's been abducted, but these two cruel scientists have taken him, and they're up to no good. And they keep making these weird allusions to what's going to happen when they introduce this language specialist to these creatures called the Sorns. And he runs away, he gets away from his captors, and he winds up meeting all these inhabitants of this planet called Malacandra, as they call it there. And because he's a language specialist, he quickly learns their different languages, and he winds up discovering that his arrival there has triggered an interplanetary solar system war that's actually been like a Cold War for many, many centuries, which we discover later on is actually kind of tied to a biblical war, but that's a whole other thing entirely. Lewis does this really elegant thing where he, like, expresses angels and demons as cosmic entities rather than as purely biblical entities. So they're not like winged creatures who come out of the heavens. They're more like beings made of pure light who always are at this weird angle because the planets are moving and they are not. They're sort of like trying to keep up with us as we're spinning around our orbits and spinning on our axes. So, like, it's always disorienting to be around them. So he thinks a lot about, like, what would be the physical ramifications of being a cosmic entity. And plus, it's cool. sort of like philosophical and epic war between the forces of good and evil set on the planets instead of on continents. So I need to go back and look at those again. Out of the Silent Planet is the first one. The second one is called Paralandra, and Paralandra is basically the Garden of Eden, Part 2. It takes place on the planet Venus. And then the third one is That Hideous Strength. It takes place on Earth, and it's the final battle between the forces of good or evil to liberate the Silent Planet, which is Earth.
Oh, my. It, really funny. So I enjoy the band Iron Maiden, right? And they often engage in the part of their business plan must be to create heavy metal book reports. And they actually have a song called Out of the Silent Planet. And I just wonder now, that's off of their Brave New World album.
It probably is referring to, I'll have to go back and look at the lyrics because I bet it refers to Lewis's book.
That is so funny. I'd be curious to hear what you think about that. All right.
I will look at the lyrics and I will report back to you. But
wow,
yeah, they're good books. I like them, and they're like a book series that I would love to see adapted into a graphic novel. Because everything should be comics.
Yes, honestly.
But why would I go back to read the Space Trilogy? Why do I want to read Shiga's Demon? Well, I want to read Shiga's book Demon because it's a comic and it's by a guy whose work I really like, and it's sitting there sort of calling for my attention every time I open up my Drive file. There it is, going like, hey, you haven't read this yet. The Space Trilogy, I feel like I need to do more prose reading, and it's a book I haven't read in a long time, and I know that it will be a comforting place to go because I spent so much time with it in my 20s. And I feel like that would be a way to get recalibrated to reading more prose again. And reading, because like sometimes, I don't know about you, Rob, but for me, sometimes reading prose, I get too hooked on the thinking I'm doing while I'm reading it rather than just reading it. Does that make sense? Like I'll be like I said this at the top of the episode. Like I'll be thinking about the argument that the author is making, and I'll be evaluating it based on what I believe to be true or know to be true, and sort of like trying to deconstruct what their argument is while I'm reading the argument and so on. Sometimes I forget to just let it wash over me, and the nice thing about comfort food is it can just wash over you. And
yes, absolutely, and I think that's actually why I also need to. When I feel like a book has a lot to offer me, I really enjoy listening to it multiple times or reading it multiple times. And because I actually am in default wash over me mode. And that has disadvantages as well, because then there are aspects that I emotionally comprehend very deeply, and I can recount various aspects of the story, but maybe not the entire story, and also definitely not have grokked as many angles on it and other avenues into meaning behind it and deconstructing and reconstructing and that kind of stuff. That doesn't happen for me typically on the first reading.
Yeah, and that's something I forget. Like I was trying to read Lajos Igri's Art of Dramatic Writing, which is an older book about writing plays, but Tony Cliff, who I have bags of respect for, recommended that book as a great book to learn about just writing in general. And it's an older book, so it's written in an older kind of style. Not Old English, but, books written 75, 100 years ago, they used a different kind of sentence structure than we use nowadays. And sometimes their sentences could be very unwieldy and big and full of lots of fragments, right? So between that and the fact that I'm also trying to go, okay, this is a good book and I need to get everything I can out of it, I'm focused so much on that in the initial reading that I'm not just letting it wash over me. And I need to go back and read it like comfort food so that if I don't get it the first time through, that's fine. You're going to read it again. Read the same chapter 3 times.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it. That's why I actually love Audible books so darn much, because it has a consistent pace too. Because the other thing I can do is the washing over me thing. That doesn't have to happen at a brisk speed. Washing over me could be very slow and methodical, And so some stories, especially in fantasy world, I can consume at a snail's pace. And I'm like, wow, I am not a productive reader.
Yeah, that's part of it, right? It's like part of it is like I'll get like kind of hooked on that whole like, well, I only got 20 minutes. I got to get this chapter behind me. So I feel like I'm making some kind of headway on it. Ugh, what a dumb trap to put myself in. What a way to prepare myself to fail, right? Because then I don't read very much, and I feel bad about it, and I don't feel like I got anything.
It's this, yes, it's the worst book scenario possible. So no, but I'm familiar with that as well, and it's I think it's necessary if we're going to cram for a podcast. You bet I'm going to use that approach.
Sure.
And I will feel at least somewhat prepared, but like I can't do that with a book I really want to connect with.
Well, that's a good takeaway for today for me.
Oh.
Reminding me to read like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right. Well, we are coming up on the end, Rob. We did it. As you like to say, boom, that's a podcast.
Exactly. Mic
that's
drop.
That's an internal language that I'm externalizing right now, and I love it.
Keep doing it. It's funny. It's like, well, we planned this thing, and it's there you go. Feels awesome to do it. Like we hit that point, and it's not there yet. It happens after we stop recording.
Yeah.
So everyone knows it's coming, but you won't hear it.
Which means that everybody knows this is coming. If you enjoyed this discussion, if you listened to this or watched this and said like, hey, this was actually interesting, this was useful to me, I'm glad I did this. A great way you can thank us for that. And this is the free version. The free version you can do is you can go to iTunes, give us a star review. You don't even have to write a review, although if you write one, that makes us happy. And that helps more people find the show for the audio version. If you're watching the video, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, there are buttons right below the screen. There's a thumbs up button. You can give it a thumbs up, and that helps more people find the show. You could also share a link. You know, you go to like your favorite social media and say, hey, this is a neat thing. You should watch it. I enjoyed it. You will too. That's a great way. Those are all free ways to thank us for doing this. But if you really enjoy it, if you really get something out of this, and you really feel like, these guys provide value into my life every 2 weeks, you go to our Patreon page. That's at patreon.com/leanintoart. And you can just, chip us, $1 a month. And there's extra stuff there. There's the extra lean shows that we record in between the main shows. But there's also, a private thread that we do once a month, the open mic thread, where we just kind of like open up the floor to talk about whatever and, talk amongst ourselves. All the people who get value out of this show can interact with one another. And it's cool watching you guys interact. And it's cool interacting with you guys there. So for those who have supported us on Patreon, thank you very much. You guys are the best. It helps us make this thing sustainable. And, we're trying to get to that, I think the sustainable trade level is $800 a month that we want to pull off of this thing, right?
Yes, absolutely. We're working to get there. We've got a lot of work to get there. And I'm hoping to raise that. So let's get us there.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be really
Someday.
cool if, like we got paid for our time to do this thing.
Exactly.
Not to emphasize the whole effort and labor part of it, but, value for value, I think is a noble thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's a feedback loop, and we say when we reach that threshold, we will do another show, right?
Yeah.
So there is a tangible reward for getting there.
There is an unlock,
Yes.
like playing Mario Kart. You can open up a new set of tires to give you extra traction and a little bit of speed, but it's a little bit less in the acceleration. But there's another tire configuration you can use for that. So. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for meeting with me every 2 weeks and having these fun discussions.
Anytime, Jersey, or in another 2 weeks. And you are very welcome. Thank you.
All right. Well, until next time, 2 weeks from now, I have been Jersey Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jersey on Twitter.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Twitter.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
Boom, that's a podcast. Thanks, everybody, for watching and hanging out with us.
Yes, thank you. Good night.
So long. You kill the stream.